Welcome to the model 15 of the run analysis training. So this model is about the spare parts. We are going to discuss and I will demonstrate how to model spare parts in a reliability diagram block. We have different concepts compared to the last model. So here we have based some concept related to spare parts such as delivery time. So delivery time is the total time to deliver spare parts since the order time until the spare part is available as the warehouse in stock. Okay, the life cycle cost we already discussed in the previous model is the method that apply to predict the whole cost related to an asset along its life cycle. And that's include acquisition, maintenance, operation, and logistic cost. So we reward the time at the specific time when the new spare part is requested, and in order to avoid delays and impact on equipment downtime and performance. So that means in order to avoid that spare part gets to zero level. The spare part is an asset in stock, so which intend to replace the damaged asset in operation when it's failed or when is scheduled some maintenance. Spare parts level is the number of spare parts in stock, and RCM is reliability centered maintenance methodology that is applied to define the spare parts, sorry, to define the preventive maintenance task. And based on this preventive maintenance task definition, we are able to define the spare parts level. So it's very important to understand this graph here, spare parts cycle time. That demonstrates the main concept behind the spare parts. So we need to define the maximum level of spare parts, and that is related to the cost, operational cost, as well as the limits that our warehouse have to keep spare parts in stock. Okay, so that's very important to define the limits, the maximum spare parts for each components, as well as the minimum spare part. So the maximum spare part has no limit, depends on the cost that's and the acquisition cost and also the management spare cost that we are able to afford. But the most important thing is to define the minimum level which enable the spare parts not the time to replace the spare part not impacting system performance. Okay, so one important concept is delivery time. So is this time since you order some equipment till the spare part is in the warehouse in the stock to be consumed. Okay, so the other point, whenever that's we order some equipment, we need to be sure that the reorder time and delivery time will be enough to avoid any impact and downtime caused by lack of spare parts. And what's impact that's the level of spare parts reduce along the time is the demand for the spare parts. So we have some demand for spare parts that's starting to reduce the spare parts level, and after this period we need to know exactly the reorder time to avoid that the spare part getting zero. So in a worst case scenario, when spare parts getting zero, and if we reorder, the minimum reorder time is enabled to when the spare part gets zero you replace for a new level. You have a cycle of spare parts. Okay, so here we can see how the spare parts is reducing along the time, and this time in here as we will be the demand for spare parts. So along the time you have some demand for the spare parts, and you need to be exactly the reorder time to keep your spare parts in the level, minimal level that you want to manage your logistics in order to avoid impacts and downtime caused by impacts and downtime. This downtime is caused by lack of spare parts. Okay, and the demand for the spare parts is defined by the reliability by the time expect time to failures that is a consequence of PDF that we can check in which time you expect the failure is starting to increase, or and have an idea when you need to replace to perform some preventive maintenance, some inspection, um, carry out some tests, and probably you need some component spare parts in this interval of time. So this is the demanding time for spare parts, and we need to be aware. And as long as we have some lifetime data analysis and reliability and maintainability data, we are able to predict when we need to establish our spare parts in stock. Okay, so here is an example that we can use reliability data to to define the spare parts. So we have a turbine here, an equipment that was a really case of a sensitivity analysis about the spare parts of a turbine. So if you look on the shaft, for example, the minimum initial spare part is 0 because we do not expect that we have early life failures in the shaft, as well as we don't need to have spare parts of the shafts in the very beginning, the early life phase of this such turbine. So if you look in here, the maximum restock time will be 7.5 years. And if you look on the information that we have here regarding these shafts, we have the failure PDF is a gumball with a mean equal to 10 years and standard deviation 2. So in a worst case scenario, we will expect to have a failure in 8 years. So concerning these 8 years that we have a demand for a new shaft, we need to plan which would be the reorder time. So here we can see that we need to set up our reorder time in 7.5 in 7 years and a half to have 6 months until 7.5 to 8, having 6 months. That is the delivery time. So what we're talking about is this time from 0 to 8 years is the time that we expect in the worst case scenario have some failures, that have expect that the shaft failed, and maybe we need some another shaft. So we 6 months before we carry out some inspection and check the check the shaft condition, and if it's necessary to replace, okay, we reorder uh, in order to in the time that it expect to have failure, we have the spare parts. So for other components, also for example, you can look on the coupling, and the coupling we have one spare part. The question is, it's very similar to the shaft. Why we've got one spare parts for the coupling? Because after this proposal and the simulation, we demonstrate that it's not necessary to have a coupling as a spare parts, but based on maintenance experience, the coupling is a very critical component. They they agree that if everything works well, they do not expect to have some failures of the coupling in the beginning, but as a critical equipment, you have at least one spare part in stock. And because of that, they put a one spare part in stock to be sure that they will run. If that something happened between 0 time and 8 years, they will already have one spare part in stock. Another case in here, we have for the labyrinth, for example, we have one spare part in stock, and we do not have a maximum restock time. So here was adopted the policy to restock the labyrinth components whenever the spare part gets to 0. And if you look on the PDF, we have a random failure as result of lifetime data analysis, and because of that, we can have a failures whatever is the time. So it's a very risk having no spare parts. In this case, that we have exponential PDF representing the time that we expect to have some failures for on the specific components, in this case labyrinth. And because of that, we have one spare part, and we replace whenever the spare part gets to 0. Okay, so we using this concept of spare part model in our RBD. So we have RBD as already explained in composition configuration in series and in parallel, or a combination of these two. In our example that has been given so far, in order to understand the preventive maintenance modeling, the inspection modeling, life cycle cost modeling, we're just using a simple diagram block with 3 components ABC in series that we are going to apply here as well. So let's take a look on the spare part input. We have again the components A, B, and C. We have the failure PDF, the reliability PDF. In ours, that's a normal PDF with mean 2 hours and standard deviation 0.1. We have a corrective maintenance PDF as well as a normal PDF with mean equal to 0.1, standard deviation equal to 0.001. We have preventive maintenance that will be carried out in 1 hour and duration 0.0.5. There, then we have spare parts, and we based on the preventive maintenance, as a discussion before. This such preventive maintenance is input from the RCM analysis, and based on such task that we carry out for components A and B, we can see here, for example, in a component A, that we can have an initial spare part 20, define 20 spare parts for the component A, because we know that 20 is 20 units time 20 hours. We'll carry out 20 preventive maintenance, and then we need to replace such 20 units. Is that what we assume here? So the spare part policy 1, strategy 1, is to have 20 from the very beginning to the whole life cycle, or we can have an initial spare parts. That's the policy 2 as 1, and whenever the spare part gets to 0, we will restock and have always one spare parts. Try to have always one spare parts in stock. Okay? So we are going to model both solution and compare them. So similarly, we have for the components B, the PDF, the reliability PDF. Here we can see that it's similar what we've got so far. We have the mean equal to 3.0, the standard deviation 0.1. We have a normal PDF to model the corrective maintenance, so mean equal to 0.1, standard deviation equal to 0.01. We have the time here to implement preventive maintenance equal to 2 years, and then based on these 2 years multiplied for 20, divided for 20, we will have set 10 intervention for a component B, and then we need 10 spare parts. So in this case, we again can have two strategy, or have the 10 spare parts in an initial time, or have one spare parts available whenever we implement our preventive maintenance, and keep whenever the spare parts get to the 0 level, we restock again. And for the component C, again we have the PDF reliability PDF is a normal PDF with these parameters value here, 4 and 0.1. For mean and standard deviation, we have the duration of corrective maintenance around 0.1 and 0.001 mean and standard deviation. We put now a 3 intervention along this 20 times units, 20 hours. So every 3 hours we will carry out some preventive maintenance componency, and based on 3 hours we will need at least 6 spare parts. So we can order the 6 spare parts in the beginning, or we can have again one spare parts in the beginning, and whenever the spare part level gets to 0, we restock that. So in order to implement this second policy of spare part, we need to be sure that the delivery time is lower and now is lower than the time to the next failure occur. So and mostly that is the point we that's enable to minimize the spare parts and as well as the life cycle cost. Okay, so we are using our model that's encompass these three components A, B, C, three blocks represented in series. So let's take a look on the spare parts modeling. So for components A, we have our scheduled maintenance already defined in discussion in a previous model, and for concerning this preventive maintenance that we establish, and every 1 unit hour, we can define the spare parts pool. Okay. So let's take a look how we're defining that. It's very important to understand the concept behind. So we have the component A here. We can input direct cost per dispensed item, and that means the cost related to the vendors or the logistic, the transportation costs. We can input in here. We do not put to make simple. We have a spare acquisition type. We can limit the number of spare parts, but we can have unlimited number of spare parts. So we have a limited number of spare parts. We are modeling initial stock level with 20 spare parts. So that's all spare part that we need along the life cycle. So it's very important to be aware that since I got these 20 parts, I will need to manage into these 20 parts in stock and be sure that they will be as in a state as good as new when requested. So that's a big challenge when we have a lot of different components and need to keep the conditions that such components keep in the state as good as new along the time. So we're gonna have a long period of time. Maybe it's a huge challenge and not possible. So because of that, it's interesting to reduce and have the minimum spare parts in here that's enable to reduce this reduce this spare part management cost as well as reduce the inventory, the necessary investment in the initial early life of such process plan, for example, and that will be demonstrated so far. But here we are consider that we have the initially we'll buy all the spare parts for the whole life cycle, and yeah, we need to we can put some logistic time to spare parts acquisition in here. So and when we define that when the restock drop to zero, we replace for more 20. So that's this is the case that if you have more a new plant or a life cycle for more 20 years, we'll replace again from the beginning. The components B, we define as initial stock all the necessary stocks, spare parts for the whole life as a 10. Since we have preventive maintenance in every two 2 units of ours, or and that we will need uh, 10 parts. And of course, we restock these 10 parts again when the spare parts level gets to zero. Okay, and here this component C, we have initial six spare parts for the whole 20 units time, 20 hours. Then we believe that we will uh, would have acquire such a six spare part for the whole life cycle, and when it gets to zero, if I go through a new life cycle, I again restock the six parts. Okay, just one important concept that we are assuming here, in order to give an easier example, that whenever we carry out some scheduled maintenance in the interval of 1 hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours, we need a spare part and we replace the old components, the failed components, the damaged components for a new one that is a new spare part. Just to make simple understanding. But of course, in a real life, we can carry out some inspection and detect some components degradation that you can repair and not necessarily need to replace for a new one that is in stock. So need to be aware about that. That is not all the case that we need some new spare parts. That's a simplification. We are doing that to make easier your understanding. Okay, so since I'm modeling um, the run the simulation, I can see that's based on the full spare parts in stock. That means when for each component I get the necessary number of spare parts for the whole life cycle. Such policy will not impact in the performance, so I will be able to achieve this 95.25% of operation availability. I will be able to keep my reliability in a state as good as new, and of course I will have my 19 numbers of preventive maintenance. So the operation availability will not be damaged, will not be put down because of unavailability of spare parts. Okay, so I can see here the average of number of items that I have in spare parts, how many parts were requested, and here the average of spare parts that was in place here, and rejected number of spare parts here if is some component failure and my spare parts level is 0. I will have here the numbers and how many times that's happened, and then if that's happened, which are the time to request a new part. And usually when it's not a plan, this time will be the impact of downtime. So I have no impact on downtime because I always have spare parts in stock. So as long as I have some uh, equipment preventive maintenance and need to replace such components, I will have the spare parts in there. Okay, I did not put the cost, but if I include the cost in here, I would say that I need to pay all the spare parts cost in the very initial uh, life cycle of my process plan. And if we consider the cash flow point of view, of course I can reduce this initial cost and have a more profitable cash flow because I don't need to invest too much money in spare parts. So my cash flow will be higher than if I invest all these spare parts in the make investment in all these spare parts in the very beginning of the life cycle. Let's take a look on each individual components. That is the simulation result that we've got from the BlockSync software. So we have for components a 9-part dispensers. So here they do not have any uh, time and to dispense. That's because, of course, in the very beginning I already had 20 spare parts in stock. So there's no emergency or requested requested because I already had all these parts in there. And my initial spare parts was 20, was not necessary to restock. So the average stock was 10 by considering that along the time what I used and what I had in stock. The current stock level is 1. In the end of life cycle, we still have 1 spare part in stock. And then, of course, as I explained, I can put some cost for managing the spare parts, and in the end I will have the total cost. For the components B, I had to use 9 spare parts, and I have no time impact on concerning spare parts and no impact on my performance system, so had no rejected items, and because of that I did not have any downtime. That is the emergency request caused by restock ordered when this after the such a specific component achieve this 0 level of spare parts, and having initial spare part stock 10. In the end I have the average stock level as a 5 units, and in the end I have 1 unit in stock, and I did not also include the cost. And for the component C, 6 parts was dispensed along the life cycle of 20 hours, 20 unit time. So I have all the 6 in the very beginning, so I have no rejected spare parts when I need to request. I have no emergency time, no time impact, and there's no any kind of impact on my downtime and my operation availability. So that were 6 parts restocked, and we have an average stock level of 3.6, and the currency stock level was 6 because since we got the 0 spare part level, we restocked again for the 6. So that's happening in 18 hours or unit time of my life cycle. Okay, and I did not put any cost, so I do not have any result concerning cost. Let's go through the case 2 now, and then for component A, rather than put here 20 units, I put only 1 unit. Okay, and for this only 1 unit, whenever the spare parts gets to 0 level in stock, I will restock it again, and the time to restock will be 0.5 hours. So let's take a look on this modeling and these results and see the impact, if I've got some impact on system performance by having a lower spare parts level. So for the components B, I adopt the similar spare parts level. So I have 1 initial spare part in stock, and whenever the spare part gets to 0, I will add a new spare part. And then of course I need some 1 unit hour to restock the spare part. And spare parts for the component C as well, starting with 1. Whenever the spare part level gets to 0, I will restock for 1 unit and request 2 unit hours to restock. So let's take a look, and if you look on the end, the result of the simulation, we see that we still have this 95% of operation availability. We still have the reliability with 1 hour. So if the minimum spare part policy concerning components A, B, or C impacts in the downtime, causing downtime for necessary time to request some units, that would impact in operation availability, and this operation availability is supposed to be lower, but that's not happening, and we can see that by implementing the minimum spare parts policy we are able to check which is the performance that we achieve. Okay, so we still have our 90 preventive maintenance encompassing the preventive maintenance implementing for the components A, B, and C. And of course, in the end, I did not put the cost, but comparing the two costs, the second policy, this policy with minimum spare parts, is more interesting than the first one concerning the cash flow, as I mentioned before. So in the very beginning, I need to have a very low investment on a spare part compared to the first policy of spare parts, and then of course I have a better cash flow in the beginning, as well as along the life cycle of such assets. So let's take a look in details. When I have 1 spare parts ordering, so the spare parts average is very low, so it's almost is close to 0 for all of this case, and some points do not get in 1, but we have 19 and 9 and 6 parts dispensed for the components A, B, and C respectively. But even having this low spare parts policy, we do not have any impact here on on in case that we achieve this 0 spare part. That means that the reorder time is very well defined, and the logistic time also very well managed. So I since I know exactly and define my preventive maintenance, and I establish that in every preventive maintenance I implement, I will need a spare parts. I know exactly the reorder time to avoid such that's when I carry out a preventive maintenance and make some intervention equipment, I will have impact also by the downtime caused by reorder a new item. So that's not happen. And here, of course, I did not put the cost but that's supposed to be in the end we will have, since we have the similar dispensed part, we will have the same cost, but along the life cycle cost we have reduced investment in here. Okay, so if you look in details the modeling, we have in the end dispensed 19 parts for the component 8, but the initial spare part was 1, we can see here. And we had to restock 19 parts. The average of stock was very low, and we have in the end the current 1 spare part in stock. No cost was important in here. In the end the total cost will be the same. Okay, for the components B, we dispensed in the total of not 9 units as expected, but the initial spare part we have only 1, and we restocked 9 parts, and we can see the average of stock level was very low, 0.25. For the component C, we dispense in the end 6 parts in the end of life cycle. We have initial spare parts as 1 unit. We restock 6 parts and we have very low average stock level. Let's take a look on scenario 3, where we start with initial 0 spare parts and we order such a component when we starting to carry out the preventive maintenance. Okay, so and that will take um, 0.5 units of time to dispense the spare parts to to uh, to to the stock, and this time will impact in the downtime in all whenever I have the preventive maintenance. And then of course he covered the quantity of 1 for each preventive maintenance time. For the case of components 8 is 1 hour. Okay, so that's is 1 unit of time in 1 hour. So for I will put that such a unit when I and the time that I implement my preventive maintenance. So I will have this delay of 0.5 and uh, on my uh, on my uh, on my downtime, and that's impacting operation availability. So what's happening here is that I have initial spare parts at 0, so I run the system. So for a component A, I need to carry out some preventive maintenance time 1, and in the timer one I order some units, and then I do not have some units, so I will need more 0.5 units of time to get this 1 unit. That's the units added here. So and that will be done in every 1 hour and every time that I do the preventive maintenance, and that will cause some impact in operation availability. The same for components B. I have 0 spare parts in stock, so in the first time in 2 units time or 2 hours that I carry out my preventive maintenance, I add and restock 1 unit, but that will take 1 unit of time to do that. Okay, and for the components C, again I do not have initial spare parts, so when I have the first restock and when I have the first preventive maintenance in 3 units of time, 3 hours, I will not have spare parts, so I need 2 units hours that will impact in downtime, and then I restock in 1 unit. So let's take a look on the effects, high effects in operation availability. Now I have 0.14 is the operation availability if I start with 0 spare parts, and when I need to replace such equipment A, B, and C, I do not have any spare parts. So that's a huge impact to adopt the 0 spare part policy since from the beginning. And yeah, we can see here the preventive maintenance 17.2, and equal to total downtime. I will have 5 number of preventive maintenance in total. So here we can see the average of spare parts very low, but I have the similar dispensed items along the time, but I need to have the average time to dispense is 0.5 for the first component A, 1 unit time for component B, and 2 unit time for component C. And this time will impact on operation availability. Okay, so let's take a look on components A. We have in the end 19 parts dispensed, but total time to dispense is 9.5 hours. So that's why is the huge impact in 20 hours. Okay, so the operation availability have this huge impact caused by the components 8 and the average of time dispensed is 0.5. So whenever I need to carry out some preventive maintenance, I have this impact of 0.5. That is real discussion in here. And then of course I restock 20 parts. My average of spare parts is very low, and in the end I have one spare part. That's has demonstrate that's how zero spare parts can and wrong reorder time can impact in your system operation availability. For a components B, we have 9 parts dispensed. The total time to dispense was 90 hours because we have 1 hour for each item that is dispensed. So whenever I carry out preventive maintenance for components B, similar to what we have in components A, we need to request some spare parts, and this downtime impact usually in operation availability, in system operation availability. So we restock 10 parts, always the average is very low. Of course, the average is very low. We are safe with in spare parts initial of the life cycle, but we lose a performance, and that's not compensated. And for the component C, again, we dispensed 6 units, but the total time to dispense was 12, so we need 2 hours for to dispense each time. So again, that's the same concept. Whenever I carry out some preventive maintenance, I have no parts available, so I need 2 hours in every time that I carry out some preventive maintenance. These 2 hours will impact in downtime, and that's happened and 6 times. So the total downtime is 12 in 20 units. Okay, so the main objective of this model was to demonstrating how to implement the concept of spare parts and including the spare parts modeling in our RBD. Okay, we have demonstrated a simple case in order to have an easier understanding for the attendees and by the attendees, and the idea of behind here is to give a simple example where we have whenever we have some scheduled maintenance, we need new spare parts, so we replace the old one for a new one. And then of course we saw that we need to be two information that are very important to have no impact of our spare parts in downtime, and that impacts on our operation availability. The first one is to define to have very clear the information concerning equipment component reliability to predict the expect time to failure. And the second one is to have very clear the information of reorder time. So if we get this information and define when is expect this equipment to fail, or even to have a preventive maintenance intervention, and we reduce from this time the reorder time. So we'll always have some spare parts when we perform some preventive maintenance. So that's the idea. We realize that we can have the minimum spare parts policy. That was the case 2 that was demonstrating that we can have initial spare parts as 1, and whenever we carry out some preventive maintenance, we replace these spare parts. The spare parts gets to 0, and of course we have some reorder time to replace the spare parts, and then but we always keep at least one component available for each necessary scheduled maintenance, and then there will no be any downtime caused for this preventive maintenance because we do not have spare parts. Okay, so if you have some questions, just send me a mail. Let's move to the next model.